755 is Real with David O'Brien and Eric O'Flaherty is on the air now.
Welcome to 755 is Real. Producer Cam here with you. A 2022 season recap edition of the show. David and Eric hosting a live room today on Friday afternoon, taking your Bravos questions in real time on the Athletic app. And a disappointing way to end 2022, obviously, if you're a Bravos fan, losing to the Phillies in the divisional series. The guys take a chance to look back at the NLDS and break down exactly what broke wrong for Atlanta. The guys also kind of take a step back and do a 1,000-foot view of the Braves' 2022 season as a whole, including the youngsters, their performance, and in addition, some of the new faces, Matt Olson and company, how they performed this year, and even take a glance into 2023, looking at some potential pivotal free agent signings and names you need to be aware of heading into the offseason. And on the topic of the youngsters, Michael Harris II, an absolute gold glove snub. David and Eric, they try to talk through exactly the thought process here and why Michael Harris II did not receive an honor he most certainly was in line for. A lot more in today's show as well, but if you want to be notified when we do host live rooms in the future when we're going to record podcasts, make sure you're following David and Eric on Twitter, at DOBrianATL, at EOF34. Also, make sure you are following the podcast feed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get the show. Also, make sure to leave a review as well on any of those podcast platforms. That helps us out so much. And make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. There should be a link in the show description that will take you directly to our show page. Without further ado, here's all of today's episode with David and Eric.
Well, it's not the kind of news that we had hoped to have at this point, that's for sure. When the team goes so far, back-to-back years, had led the Dodgers 2-0 and 3-1 in the NLCS 2 years ago. Then you win the World Series without ever even facing an elimination game. When you abruptly exit in the division series that next year, man, does it seem especially abrupt. You forget what that was like. It wasn't that long ago when it happened, but you forget what it was like when the expectations are, so much higher, and rightfully so. But I just thought this was kind of a perfect shitstorm of elements that conspired to kind of undermine the Braves. And we can go through those. But what were you thinking watching it?
I just thought they couldn't match the energy. It seemed like Philly just came out, got off to that. You never know if game one goes the Braves' way, or if some of those soft hit balls don't fall in for Philly in the first couple innings, it changes everything. But they're coming off the rush of winning the wild card series.
Yep.
So they're coming off that rush, and then you get some breaks early in that first game, and it's like, oh, here we go, and they just pick up right where they left off. Versus the Braves just been sitting for 5 days off of a boring series in Miami. I felt like, you can't blame that 5-day layoff on anything. You have to find a way to combat it. You have to either do, live games or live BPs or something to keep your guys sharp. But I just feel like it was definitely a perk for Philly coming off that rush of winning the wild card series and then jumping out to an early start. I didn't feel like the Braves ever matched their energy after that.
And we've talked about this so many times. And there was a reason why some people were voiced concern beforehand about having 5 days off, because it never happened before. Now, the Braves had 4 days off last year. There's a difference. They were pushed to the end. It wasn't, but they were not in, as one Brave said, they weren't in playoff mode for 4 months. This year, I'll just list the things that I think combined to make this early exit. What you just said, I think is so accurate. I think there's a reason why, say, the Marlins have won the World Series twice as a wild card team, and they've never won a division title, which is amazing. But there's been a few other wild card teams win it all too. Teams that push to the end and then have to play that extra series or play all the way through the end stay sharp, and they don't have to flip the switch again like teams that clinch, whether it's the Dodgers, and anybody could see this coming with the Dodgers. They got off to the huge early start. They still played great ball despite a lot of injuries during the season, but they clinched so early. So then they had time to relax. They talked about guys getting healthy. They get the rotation in order. I mean, Braves fans from the 90s saw that so many times when the Braves clinched early. 100-win teams clinch early. And then you try to flip the switch and get it cranked back up to that level again, and you just can't do it in one game. And if you're facing a team that that had to play for its life to the end, they never really had that downtime. This was magnified this year, I thought, because not only was it 5 days, which was longer than ever, it was really 7 days because the Braves clinched. The first game in Miami was a totally just punt it. You come off that incredible series against the Mets. So that next day you play that night game Sunday night against the Mets. You finish off a sweep, which to me had all the feelings of a postseason series, the energy, the level of competition, the pitching, and the Braves swept them. Then the next day in Miami, you're playing in front and sold out crowds every night at Truist Park for that series. Next night, you're playing in front of 10,000 in Miami. The Braves, they played everybody, but they got into town like 4 a.m. It was just that, so the next night you go out and clinch. Yep. You celebrate a little bit, you clinch, you celebrate a lot because you didn't celebrate getting a playoff berth at all. So you do celebrate clinching. Okay.
Yeah.
Next day, you only played the regulars that needed to play 162, that wanted to play 162, but you rest most of the guys. So the next day, the rest started with clinching. And you clinched on a Tuesday night. You had a whole week until you started your series against the Phillies. The Phillies they played for their lives down the stretch. They were a distant third behind the Braves and the Mets. So they had to fight for that wild card spot. They came in sharp. They're 2 pitchers, whereas the Braves had one pitcher coming off the flu and the upper respiratory with Max Fried. He just wasn't himself, and we saw that right away. It was obvious. And then Strider, who pitched terrific for 2 innings, but just ran out of gas. And you had said that before that game. You kind of wondered how long he'd be able to go. I thought he'd be able to go longer, harder, but I think I underestimated being off that long. I mean, he really hadn't pitched in 4 weeks.
I was feeling pretty dumb thinking that the way he pitched the first 2 innings.
Yeah. But he just shot it all right there, man. Yeah. I mean, that was what he had left because his velo. I know he still had a couple of 97-mile-an-hour pitches that inning, but his velo on the home run, I think, was 93, which we haven't seen all year, So, so there was those things. And then you had unfortunate, and this happens all the time. This is just one of those things that teams have to overcome. You have 2 or 3 guys that just aren't hitting.
Yeah. Well,
the Braves had some of their key guys really didn't hit at all in that series. Acuna hit for a good average. Olsen had a couple of home runs, and Darno. And really, Darno and Olsen had like 4 of the team's 5 homers in the series and like 7 of their 10 RBIs. They really weren't getting much from anybody else. Acuna, like I said, he got on base, hit for average, but really nobody else was doing anything. Couple that with two starts that were, not what you expect from those guys. Then Charlie come on. Can you have the snake bitten like Charlie? Back-to-back postseason losses. He exit with an injury after getting hit by a line drive.
Yep.
So, I mean, I know it sounds like excuse making if the Braves said it like this, so they didn't. And to their credit, they did not make excuses, but that's us. We're talking about it, and we can make excuses. Were the Braves a better team than the Phillies? Yes, but that doesn't matter because the Phillies were a better team right then in that series. They outplayed them completely. And that happens in the postseason. Unfortunately for the Braves, it happened in the first round. They never really, like you said, had a chance to kind of get going, have one big game and get their feet under them and get their energy back and start playing up to their potential. Before you know it, they're down 2-0.
Yep. Yeah, I felt like, that whole thing of anybody can pretty much beat anybody in a short series in baseball if you have 3 or 4 bats go cold or a starter struggle.
In a 5-game series, yeah. Not in a 7 maybe, but 5 for sure.
Yeah, I think 7's harder because your studs are going to pitch twice and they're not going to suck twice. But I think that's why the players fought so hard. The expanded playoffs thing because it's almost like baseball's known what a crapshoot the postseason is for so long that you have to earn your right to be in that crapshoot. Now, watching the playoffs for me, it's been fun. The Padres beating the Dodgers, some of the upsets, everything that's happened. The postseason's been amazing. But from a player side, I think they've known that those possibilities are already there, and it's just the hottest team's going to win.
I mean, you literally had 3 teams that we all kind of recognized as super teams in the NL. 3 100-win teams. The Dodgers didn't make it past the first round, the division series round. Neither did the Braves. And the Mets got beat in a wild card. I mean, that's crazy. Now you got teams didn't have 90 wins battling it out. Because it don't matter, man. It's just who's playing at their best when you have to be playing at your best. And the Braves were last year, man. They rolled into the postseason so full of confidence. Remember how great they were playing down the stretch, that game in San Diego when Will Smith had the bases loaded, none out, and got out of it? They just caught fire right then, and they went into the postseason feeling so good about themselves. And they just blitzed everybody. I mean, nobody had a chance.
Yeah, and you watch the games, you can see that. You can see that energy difference between the Padres and Dodgers. You can see that energy difference between, for the Braves and Phillies. And it's not necessarily that you're not going to be looking like you're having a ton of fun or playing with a ton of energy when you're getting your ass kicked.
Yeah.
And if you looked at that Phillies Braves series, for me, the Phillies just outplayed them. They just played better. You could say bad luck or this happened or that happened. When you look at it as a whole, the Phillies just kicked their asses.
And the other thing, and again, this is not you can't use this as an excuse because you're going to run into this every year as long as New York, L.A., West Coast teams are in
it. That pisses me off.
Day games.
Yep.
Unfortunately, unless you're playing a New York team, and there's no West Coast teams, you're going to have day games. And the Braves, for whatever reason, were a below 500 team all season. And that's not a small sample size. There were 4 games under 500 in day games. At night games, they were 20. Well, just do the math. I mean, at night, they were unstoppable, man. I mean, by comparison. I looked it up. They hit.
Put that aside. The fact that they make these teams, certain teams, if you're not a big market team, you're going to play a certain percent of your games with the shadows.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. That has an effect, man.
It's a game changer.
And if you're a strikeout team, a team that strikes out a lot, you're going to have some really ugly strikeout games in those conditions. But, during the season, though, the Braves, their ERA was literally a half run lower at night. And they literally scored a half run more at night per game. So that's a full run difference.
Yeah.
A net run difference.
No rhyme or reason to it. I guarantee not a single player can put his finger on it.
Yeah. And next season, and this is not to blame anybody, but next season, if I'm the manager, I've got to look at that and go, okay, it doesn't make any sense. But let's look at what we do. Maybe do things a little differently next year. Just try something different. And we talked about this a little bit on the last podcast, but whether that's make sure that everybody's doing a little more. I'm not saying go out and do full infield on a day game. It's crazy. But make sure everybody knows to get there and get going, whether that's everybody hits in the cages a little bit more, the indoors, whatever you have to do. But get there a little earlier and maybe try something different, because that's kind of weird, man, that the day game numbers would be so bad. It's not 5 games. You're talking about nearly a third of your game, or over a quarter of your games.
Yeah. What's crazy about baseball, though, is stuff like that happens with no rhyme or reason, and they could change nothing and be the best team in baseball in day games next year for the same lack of reasoning.
Yeah.
So if I was running it, I'd probably play it by ear. If we get off to a start,
right.
Say in April, your team gets off to a start where they're terrible in day games again, then it's like, all right, we need to change things. But in baseball, it's just crazy because stuff like that happens and nobody knows why. Like that year we couldn't win on Mondays.
Yeah. And I will say the atmosphere at Truist Park is a lot better at night games, and that's not a dig at fans at all, man. It's hard getting there at 1:00 and being fired up like you are for a night game. You're off work, you popped a few or whatever, Yeah. I mean, when you got to get out there and beat traffic to get out there at 1:00, And then the team, unless the team starts out fast with a good first inning or so, it has a totally different feel than the electricity that place has at night.
Well,
Same thing like San Diego, their atmosphere at the night games against. Oh my God,
it's been that park looks unbelievable right now.
It doesn't even resemble what you remember, does it?
No,
at all?
I remember it the way you're describing it. Like it felt like. When you were playing in a Padres game, especially a day game, you felt like 90% of the crowd was people that just were walking by and could see in there.
Yeah.
Checked how much tickets were. They were $10.
The Knothole Club.
They just go check it out for 10, 20 minutes. But it never had that kind of energy. If they make it to the World Series, I might try to go down and see a game in that park and see how different it is.
Oh, my God, dude. It was so different when the Braves were there the last 2 years than it was before. It used to be, like you said, leisurely crowds, great weather. You're just enjoying the sunshine. Oh, and if the team wins, that's great. But, I mean, now the place is energized. It's got a lot more the feel of like Dodger Stadium at night now. I mean, and their atmosphere for the playoffs has been just Phillies comparable at night. I mean, because Phillies waited so long to be back in this. But man, the atmosphere the other night at that Dodger, when they eliminated the Dodgers that night, that was insane.
Yeah, it was insane just watching on TV.
So anyway, so it's obviously a rough way. Everybody's expectations are so high. Everybody's talking about, is this a better team than last year? And there were reasons to believe that it was. If everybody's healthy and you got your pitching lined up and all that, and guys are hitting on all cylinders like the offense was for a while in the second half. But if it's not, we all know how fast that can change, man.
Yeah, 100%.
But was it a better team? I'd say at its best, yes. Yeah, this would have been a better team. But last year,
hotter though. It's kind of tough because if you watch the season, there was matchups between the Braves and Mets who were pretty similarly matched. I mean, they won the same amount of games, but there were series where one team at some point was so much better than the other. When they went into New York and lost 4 out of 5, you're like, shit, this thing's over. When New York came in at the end of the year, they didn't stand a chance. You just knew the Braves were a better team at that moment.
Absolutely.
That's how the playoffs play out.
Yeah, it was when they've lost 4 out of 5 in that series up in New York, you thought there's no way the Braves are going to beat the Mets this year. There's no way.
It's just not their year.
And then they got hot and they swept them at home, and it was like, okay, now they've done it again. They've silenced us again. But then in that 1 week period between that sweep of the Mets, and I just thought they got so high against the Mets that it was like playoff atmosphere. Then you come crashing down in the Marlins series and you play a real ragged series. You're resting guys. Then you got 5 days off, and then you try to flip a switch and get back in that mode you were in against the Mets, and it just didn't happen, man.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of like once that wave starts, you got to keep riding it. It's kind of hard to get off, but the way I look at it, it's like if you
exactly. If they could have played at that level right into it, I think they could have sustared that playoff mode that they were in.
Day. Yeah.
Yep. But they could not go.
I don't blame them for being worn out. I think it wore the Mets out too. But they were playing playoff baseball since June.
Yep. And the Mets, to their credit, the Mets were fending off the Braves, so they were in kind of the same thing. They were getting their asses chased for 4 months, I mean, they were up 10.5, then all of a sudden the Braves were just nipping at their heels, so they kind of were in an intense mode for 4 months too.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Phillies are just like people have written them off. They fire their manager, they completely restart. They make some big moves, and it was just a different feel to their team.
Yeah. There's no better place to be than being written off and just catching fire and rolling into it with nothing to lose versus the Braves are defending champs.
Yeah.
I think whether a guy would ever admit it or not, it's hard to muster up the same energy when you've won it last year as it is to have it when you're just chasing it. You don't even know what's in front of you and you're just going into it hair on fire. And that felt like to me what the series looked like was that the Phillies were just – I mean, they just came in with so much energy. They wanted it so bad.
And the Braves hit 180 in those 4 games with 5 homers, 11 walks, 43 strikeouts, and 128 at bats. 43 strikeouts.
I heard, I think it was Curtis Granderson or somebody, on a post game talking about it's so much different facing your relief pitchers or having the thrower scoot up close, but you just can't simulate playoff stuff, 98 mile an hour, adrenaline filled playoff stuff that you're going to see in those playoffs. And it was all hitters, because I think pitchers.
Oh, you're talking about the live BPs?
Yeah, just trying to stay sharp during that.
Yeah, I heard that too. Yeah, they were saying you can't do it. It's just not the same at all.
There's no way to simulate it. I thought about you could bring up like your hardest throwing minor leaguers, but the problem is they're going to smoke somebody in the head or break a finger or break a wrist. Like the risk of that move of keeping your guys seeing guys that are amped up and amped up stuff is
right.
These guys are going to be amped up, and they're not in the majors because they have the stuff without the control yet, or they let their emotions get the best of them. And you can't really risk, some minor leaguer coming up and letting a two-seamer sail into Acuna's wrist. Then you look stupid because you don't have Acuna for the series.
And they're not trying to get guys out in the same way that, teams are in the postseason. It's just different.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking at I wanted to go back and look at the regular season numbers real quick on the night and day thing. I mean, just not to overplay that, but man, it was just people saw it all year. It was there. This is a team that won 101 games. They go 101-61, and at night they are. I got it right here. They are the Braves at night, 77-34. They're 44 games over 500 at night. And then you're 4 games under 500 in a day.
Yeah, I mean it's
77-34. They had a 3.30 ERA night games, and the hitting was just. I mean, this was they led the majors. They were tied with the Blue Jays at OPS for the majors OPS lead at 7-78 night games. Mm-hmm. Had 175 home runs. Next highest was 166. The Yankees in one different game, only one less game. And nobody else. The Dodgers had 153. They were the only other team with more than 146. Braves had 175 home runs in night games. I mean, it's just a different machine at night. They were,
I thought the playoffs
plundered teams.
I
did too. I thought with the energy, I thought it would, that it wouldn't be. And then the day games, 725 OPS during the season and 68 homers in 51 games. So just a very different. Hit 228 during the season, or 238 during the season in day games, 310 OBP. It was just all across the board. We saw it again and again all season during day games.
And they won the night game against the Phillies.
Exactly. The only game they won in the postseason was a day game, but it was delayed 3 hours, became a night game.
Yep.
Yep. Exactly. And they shut them out.
Well, that's a bad, if it's there's always something like that with a team that doesn't add up, but that's a bad one to have if you're not in New York, because you are going to get those middle of the day times,
especially if you got West Coast teams like you do, like this year. Even just one West Coast team.
Yep, because then they're going to get a later window at least.
Yeah, tomorrow NLCS finally gets a night game. All right, once you get to the LCS, you get night games, but the first 2 rounds, man. Real quick before we take some calls, the Gold Glove announcements yesterday, man. I got to say, rarely am I as surprised. There's always a couple of guys on there you're like, he made it, or you're going, he didn't make it. Rarely have I been as surprised as I am by 2 this year. Machado is not a finalist at third base.
I didn't understand. I mean, especially maybe it's harder to believe after watching that series against the Dodgers where he just ate everything up.
Right.
So it's fresh in your mind, but I still
and playoffs aren't
him as a guy.
And playoffs don't count, but still, you had Kim. Oh, I'm sorry. You had Arenado. You can't complain about that. You had McMahon with the Rockies. I mean, they're all really good, obviously, and Cabrian Hayes with the Pirates. So it's a really tough field. But that one shocked me. But even more, and everybody knows what I'm going to say, Michael Harris is not a Gold Glove finalist in center field. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous.
I couldn't believe it so much. I even went online and started looking at what glove companies these guys are sponsored by, because I'm like, maybe they're just maybe
it makes no sense, man.
Rawlings guys get the favor here, but it wasn't. There was a few positions where it was almost 2 out of 3 were Wilson guys or something like that. But I'm like, I can't believe this guy after watching him. It doesn't make any sense. And
you had multiple managers comment on him unsolicited after playing against the Braves about how for real he is, about how good he is, what a game changer he is. So
it used to be kind of accepted that if you didn't put up big offensive numbers, minus being a catcher or pitcher, you probably.
But he did put up big offensive numbers.
I know. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I can't even think of a fake reason why he wouldn't be in there.
And then, it made sense when somebody yesterday on Twitter, somebody looked it up and said they saw a criteria where, and I went, because it would have made sense, where you had to play a certain number of innings. I've got it in front of me, in fact. You have to play a certain number of innings.
Of the team's first 138?
Yeah. It is. They're trying to avoid a situation like you had years ago where Palmeiro had won a Gold Glove at first base when he was a DH
of the time.
Yeah. So this is their way of doing that. Plus, make sure that a guy plays enough during the season. So it says you have to play in the field for infielders and outfielders have to have played in the field for at least 698 total innings through his team's 138th game. This equates to playing in the field for approximately 7.5 innings per game and approximately 67% of his team's games by his team's 138th game. Blah blah blah. Well, for one thing, I don't know why you would put more emphasis on starting the season with the team. How about guys that get hurt? That get hurt that come into the season on the IL, like Acuna did, for instance. He's not Gold Glove candidate this year, but what about him? And a guy like Harris who gets called up, late. There's a lot of guys that get called up late. So you're putting more emphasis on those games than you are for down the stretch in September.
Yeah.
So, but it's neither here nor there because he far surpassed the 698. He had played
so much
91
better when I saw that.
Yeah. He had played 91 games at that point, and he played 9 innings a game, or 8 innings if they had a few of those games. But nevertheless, it would have been, I didn't add it up, it would have been close to 800 innings. So it's not even close.
Yeah.
So it just makes no sense. If you look at the analytics, his analytics are great. Never mind the eye test, which says he's the best center fielder in the league. But Grisham, really good. I like him with the Padres. Victor Robles, I thought Robles was going to win multiple Gold Gloves. I thought he was going to become a Gold Glover every year. He hasn't been that guy until this year. He has looked a lot better out there. So I can see him too. Then you got Alec Thomas from the Diamondbacks. Really?
Well, that was another thing I was trying to blame it on. I'm like, it's just big market guys or something. I look at it, I'm like, okay, you got
it made no sense.
You got Arizona, it's. I felt better when I saw that tweet about him not qualifying. And I was like, oh, okay, he'll get it next year. And then today I saw somebody say he did qualify, or maybe you did the math. Somebody did the math and said he definitely qualified. And I was like, shit, I don't have any reason for this.
I mean, no offense to Alec Thomas, but half the baseball fans in America wouldn't even know who he is.
Yeah,
and he played 113 games. He ended up playing fewer games and at bats than Harris did. And he hit 231 with a 619 OPS. So if you were going old school and saying he's got to hit some, it just made no sense, man.
Well, see, when I was looking up the glove deals, Alec Thomas was a Rawlings guy. So it was starting to click. You had 2 out of 3 guys for center field were Rawlings. I'm like, okay, let me dig deeper into this. And then the next one, it was like second base or something, was Wilson, and then some made-up glove company. So that theory died pretty quick. But, I mean, the fact that I'm getting online trying to search for this type of crap to explain it to myself tells you all you need to know.
It's crazy, man. He played he had 907 innings, so he didn't even have as many innings. That's not even neither here nor there.
But I can't come up with anything.
All I can think is that big-ass center field at Arizona. And at Colorado, you're playing in that huge outfield. All I can think of is he must have had a bunch of plays that opposing managers saw that he got their vote, because I think managers are part of the panel, or that played well in the analytics. But still, if you stack up the analytics, it says that Harris should have been there. So anyway, just weird. I mean, it's not like, he only played 50 games this year, so you can say, yeah. Andrew didn't play center field right off the bat, so he would have started his streak earlier if he did. I thought Harris would be able to start his streak right away,
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be one of those things where once he gets it, I don't think he's letting go of it.
Yeah. Yep. Anyway. I'd like to get some. I wish I was around some players right now to get some reactions. Opposing players. That because this guy was,
like the biggest thing too is,
and that arm.
We're the most in shock because we watched him play every day.
Yeah,
and I think maybe if we'd watched these other guys play every day, we'd like Robles. I see more than anybody. So then,
he's terrific,
and he's unbelievable. So he's not a guy I'm questioning, but I didn't really see Alek Thomas play that much. Maybe I'm offline with this, and he's right there with Michael. But yeah, it's just I was all over the internet trying to come up with conspiracy theories for why he didn't get this thing. Just because at least a nomination top 3, because he's one of the best I've seen already.
And everybody says that too. Everybody says that. I mean, it's not just anyway. The Braves did have 4 finalists. Max Fried, who's won it 2 years in a row. He's going to try to start a Maddox streak here. He is a finalist along with Tyler Anderson and Corbin Burns. Then Travis d'Arnaud is a finalist along with Anito, but unfortunately Real Muto is also a finalist. But he's a finalist. Matt Olson, that was a surprise to me a little bit, because I know he said it himself, the kind of year he expected, especially early on. He had dropped some pop-ups, missed a couple of scoops he should have made. But, over the course of the year, I think people realize, the guy's pretty solid. I know he takes a lot of criticism, but he's a finalist and Freddie is not. So, Goldschmidt, Christian Walker, the other two, those 2 guys are both really solid over there. So I don't think Olson will win it, but he has won 2 American League Gold Gloves. And then you got Dansby, which is about time, right? I mean, Dansby is he's playing the best defense of his life right now, and you got a good field, Isan Kim and Miguel Rojas of the Marlins. But I wouldn't be surprised if Dansby wins this thing.
Yeah, he could.
I think Dansby could win that thing.
For me, the thing that stands out the most about Dansby is just the pressure plays, the quick decision plays. I feel like he's always able to slow the game down. You got a guy going to third, hard ground ball, and he's got a split second to decide if he can get that guy or take the out at first.
Yeah.
And it's just instincts for him.
Yeah,
he just picks it, flips to third, and gets that big out that changes a game.
Yep.
I don't even know if that play right there really shows up in defensive metrics, because the ground ball might be right to him.
Yeah, I don't think it does.
The decision he makes, like that quarterback mindset he seems to
instinct,
have, it's top notch.
Yeah, and we could have a whole nother discussion on whether they're going to sign him, but really there's no new developments on that other than what Alex told us the day after. Alex basically said, and I'm not being cynical, I'm not trying to take a shot at Alex, but basically he said almost exactly the same things that he said about Freddie a year ago, which was he wants to be here. Well, he knows we want him to be here. We both said it publicly that we will hope to continue. He said the same thing about Dansby. So I think there's a little better chance. But then again, I also thought there was still a good chance we're going to sign Freddie. But the lockout, I think, kind of quashed any remaining hope they had of doing that. And they didn't want to go 6 years with him because of his age. Well, Dansby's, a couple years younger than Freddie was. It's going to come down to, I think, the price, obviously, it usually does. I don't think the years are going to be a problem, because I know Dansby's going to keep himself in great shape. He's never had injuries other than, getting hit by a ball, that kind of thing. He's been more durable than ever in the last couple of years. So, and how are you going to replace him if you don't sign him? That's the biggie to me. I mean, there's not a Josh Donaldson out there, an obvious choice to come in to take a 1-year deal with a high AAV in order to reestablish himself on the free agent market, kind of like Correa did with the Twins last year when he got a 3-year deal, but he had 2 opt-outs, and he's going to opt out. So he effectively did that last year. I don't see an obvious guy like that this year at all.
No, and the guys that are out there are going to cost more than him. That
Yep.
are, the guys that you're going to sign to similar deals at lengthwise, they're going to cost 5 to 10 more a year. So for me, he would make the most sense. But the fact that nothing's been done, and they've been talking all year, I think it's just going to come down to maybe Dansby just wants to know how much he's passing up. If he gets to a team to tell him, you're worth 28 a year for us, and the Braves are at 20, that's $8 million a year. That's a big gap. If it's 1 or 2 or 3 off,
right?
I could see him taking that discount.
Yeah, you're living at home. You got the income tax lower than it is in a lot of places. You're living at home. You don't have to have a second home. All that. That's worth a couple million a year. Never mind the fact that he loves the side. I mean, he loves Atlanta. He's from here his whole life. But when you get up asking a guy to take $5-6 million a year less per year in a long-term deal, asking a guy to take $25-30 million less total is a bit much. Yeah,
there's also a principle of it too, of just wanting to feel valued by your team or wanting to get paid a fair amount.
Right.
I could see that coming into play too, where it's like, hey, teams are telling me I'm worth 30 or 25, and you're telling me I'm worth 18 to 20.
And all I've done for you, I want, you want to. I was a huge part of winning a World Series.
Yeah.
And the other guys on the market obviously are really good ones too. And I think they're all going to get more than Dansby. Xander Bogaerts, Trey Turner because of speed and the bat and the power rather. To tell you the truth, and then the other one is Carlos Correa, who's terrific. To tell you the truth, Trey Turner, I've seen projections of him getting anywhere from 5 to 7 million more a year than Dansby, even close to 10. I don't think Trey Turner's worth that. I love Trey Turner, and he's killed the Braves. So Braves fans all remember him being the greatest player in the world because he's terrific against the Braves when he was with the Nationals and also with the Dodgers. But if you look at his postseason numbers, my God, dude, he's OPS, and it's not a small sample size. I mean, it's he's got like a low 600, 614 or some OPS. Carlos Correa, who's got like 300 and some ABs in a postseason, has like an 840 OPS, something like that, like 200 points higher, more than 200 points higher in a postseason. And we're talking like 70 games for Correa.
Correa's one of those guys that kind of suffers from the Mike Trout effect, where he's just so great every year you kind of stop appreciating him. But he is a hell of a player.
He's an awesome player, and the defense is outstanding. Whereas Trey Turner's defense it cost them in the postseason. He was not great this year defensively.
No, and that for me, that's what Dansby brings the most to the table is holding down the shortstop. I know he hit this year. But the thing that you value most about him is not just his defense, but his defense under pressure. Yeah.
I put this on Twitter, man, and I don't know if it's realistic at all, especially since he's a Boris client. But Correa, if I've decided in my head I'm not going to pay Dansby, $22 million a year over 6 years, or maybe he's asking for $25 million. But if I've decided I'm not going to pay him the 25 or whatever, and you got to replace him. There's no obvious shortstops in the system that can step right in the next couple of years. You're going to have to do it. Get a really good shortstop, probably, or just hope that some combination of Arcia and somebody you bring in a platoon with him, maybe, or Grissom there. I don't know if you want to do that at such an important position. If I'm the Braves, I seriously see but it's a Boris client, so it's hard. But Correa is, that guy. He's everything you'd want from that position, like Dansby, but hits better. He's a better hitter over his career. The OBP is something I noticed today, 366 each of the last 2 years. And then I saw him talking last night, doing the analyst thing, just steps into it like he's been doing it 20 years. This dude is sharp, man.
Well, he's really informed on the analytical side.
Oh my God!
To him talk, it's pretty
really informed. And so I looked up some stories and stuff about him, and I wanted to hear more about his reputation, read more about it. I didn't realize what a reputation he has as a leader, like a real good leader, clubhouse leader, positive, upbeat, all that stuff. And I don't know if it's realistic whatsoever, but
I don't think it's realistic at all.
No, not with Boris client. But
he's going to get paid.
But if you're going to pay, if you're not going to pay Dansby what somebody else is going to pay him, then if you're going to pay another $5 million a year for the position, but again, it's way over what they're paying any of those other guys in extensions. But I mean, Carlos Correa is a much more accomplished player than any of those other guys, too. Any of them.
Well, it's just like with him, you're either going to overpay to get him or he's going to take another 1 year deal that's an overpay. But I just can't see Boris being like,
Right.
what, let's do 4 years, 100.
And he's opting out of 2 years at like 30-some million a year. He's opting out.
So he's going to want at least that or more per year.
Right. So, yeah. Anyway.
That's a whole other player, that difference between 20 to 30. That's your
player. Well, the people that are talking about, like that are talking about going to get a certain pitcher from the Mets, DeGrom, you're talking $40 million for a guy who's pitched how many starts the last 2 years? Well, I just said that to me would be the most shocking thing the Braves would have done because it just does not fit their MO at all. But if you're going to spend that kind of money, I'd rather go out and get an elite middle of the order hitter, or an elite shortstop, and still get another starter or a two-pull. I think you need to really enforce the bullpen, and you could get a couple of good relievers and a shortstop for what you'd pay DeGrom.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been watching that Houston bullpen in the season, or San Diego's bullpen, these teams that are coming in and they just have stud after stud coming in, and that's how the Braves were when they won the World Series.
Yeah.
Keeping the games close or just shutting the other team down, going to your pen in the fifth and feeling just fine about it. That's an area I think the Braves, especially with Kenley leaving, they need to focus on and make sure they have.
Yeah. I think you need to add two big arms in the bullpen. Two big arms. You got Matzik he's out for the whole year. Luke will be back. I'm assuming they're going to re-sign him. But, yeah, you could use another big arm to go with Iglesias and Mentor in that back of that pen, for sure.
Yeah, and you're going to have to see what Luke brings. He could be one of those guys that bounces back from Tommy John and everything's fine, or he could have that rough first year back from Tommy John where he's battling the whole time.
Yeah, so the DeGrom thing just makes no sense to me, and I know why people say it. I don't blame them, because when DeGrom comes out and says, let somebody know he'd like to pitch for the Braves, well, he gets you excited, and you think, well, the Braves are going to pursue him, but it just goes against everything the Braves have done as far as not overpaying for free agents, especially starting pitchers. They don't think that's an efficient way to build. And then he's a guy that's proven it's not efficient because, is he just going to flip the switch and all of a sudden be a 30-start guy next year and pitch 170 innings? Exactly. I don't know.
The only thing I thought about that was he just wasn't – if they wouldn't extend him maybe selfishly a little bit, he wasn't going to risk not pitching in 100%.
Well, that's a red flag, isn't it?
In a sense, yeah, especially when you're fighting for a division. But
right.
But for me, if DeGrom's willing to go short term, super high pay, it's worth looking into. But with his injury history last year and the year before, barely, pitching basically half her.
Man, that would blow up in your face if you did a short term, super high pay. You can't even insure 1 year deals, but if you went $40 million a year for 2 years, and then he goes what he's done the last 2 years, you're like, why did we do that?
Yeah, and I think that's what scares you more about pitchers than a position player.
Yeah. And you got such a good foundation returning too, with Strider joining Fried and Wright. And I know people, it's because of recency bias, people are going to go, yeah, but you can't count. Yeah, you can. Wright showed he turned a corner this year. He's a stud. Strider showed he is and Strider is special, man. He just hadn't pitched in 4 weeks. And Fried got sick at a bad time. You can't, that happens, man. It just was a combination of things. But that's pretty solid, those three. And then Charlie, for more than half the season, Charlie was regular Charlie for 17 starts, 17 straight, a period of, when they really were chasing down the Mets. Charlie was damn good.
Yeah.
So, anyway. Oh, it's going to be – the Braves look good for next year. Whatever happens this winter, they look good for next year. So, and Alex is no dummy. He's going to fill it in with the right pieces. But I think – and that's why I still think there's a good chance that they sign Dansby, because it just makes too much sense. It just makes too much sense.
Yeah, it does. I watched this postseason, and I wonder how it's going to affect team spending. I wonder if they're going to be like, we got to do everything we can to just get our foot in the door, or if they're going to think we don't have to do that much because if
other teams –
yeah, because they're like, if we just
like
get
Cleveland
our foot in the door, we got a shot to go deep.
Like Cleveland.
Like Cleveland.
Yeah. Cleveland's become the new Tampa Bay, man.
And they had the Yankees on the ropes.
They sure did. They should have beat them.
Seattle, if Seattle would have almost all four of the teams that were the underdogs had a chance to win. If Seattle would have won that,
oh my God, that would have been crazy. And they could have. Seattle could have won any of those 3 games.
Yep, they were in all 3 games. They had the lead in 2.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's really an exaggeration to say that wild card series, just being able to ride that wave into the next series.
Oh yeah,
a lot of teams and hurt the favorites.
I think you got to look at tweaking it somehow next year. I don't know what you can do. You could make it best of 7 because next year the season is not going to have to be condensed.
Yeah,
you could easily make it best of 7.
Yeah. I mean, you have to look at it. I don't know. I think you could let it play out next year too. And if the same thing happens,
right,
again, and it's like,
then you have to.
That 5-day layoff is hurting teams. But
yeah,
if there was a way to make it only 4 days, even that'd be nice.
Yeah. Anyway, real quick, what do you think before we take some calls? We are going to take some calls. Sorry, guys. Real quick, for my picks, obvious ALCS. I mean, you got at this point, Astros. I would have picked Astros anyway, for sure. I would have picked Astros. In fact, I did on our thing. I said no more than 6. I think 5 because the Astros are better at every facet of the game except Aaron Judge.
Yep.
And then I'm taking the Phillies.
Are you? I'm going Padres.
I'm taking the Phillies, man. I just think they're on a roll. Something special's happening, but neither one of those is going to surprise me. And I don't think it matters because I think the Astros are winning the World Series in 5 games.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
They are awful good.
I think that Phillies series, the one thing that happens in the postseason, if you can split that first 2-game set on the road,
yeah,
now you got a 5-game series with home field advantage.
And their fan base is going to be crazy, man.
Yeah, it's going to be
cool weather. Yeah, I mean, that's not going to surprise me either way that series goes, but I'll stick with the Phillies on that one. How about if the third-place team out of the NLDS, the team nobody was even paying much attention to all year, ends up going to the World Series?
It'd be just about right.
I'll take the Stros, though, in 5, maybe 6, but no more than that, but I think it'll be 5. They're going to be home field advantage.
Their bullpen is so good.
Yep. They're loaded, man. They just keep reloading. And Dusty, everybody is going to be pulling for Dusty, even if you hate the Astros and the cheating and all that stuff. Dusty had nothing to do with that. And if you don't like Dusty, man, I mean, you don't like people.
I like Dusty, but I'm pulling for the Padres.
Yeah. It's a great story. Padres is a great story.
Yeah. And it's a likable group.
Yep, it is. Machado is really matured, man.
As you know, what's crazy about him is it's like if he hadn't been the guy he's been and had all these things come up, and I've been on teams that he did some dirty plays against. He tried to step on a guy's leg when he's playing with the Dodgers or against the Dodgers, and he did a lot of this stuff. But just watching him as a player, I'm like, man, that dude is a stud.
Yep. Yeah, he was like the consensus dirtiest player in the MLB a few years ago when we did a poll. Now nobody even votes for him. Yeah. He hadn't done anything stupid in a long time.
Yeah.
And the Padres, how about if they do it without Tatis, man? Without him playing at all this year.
Yeah. Well, I could tell that they weren't going to be phased mentally by a suspension because most of those guys were making little comments, kind of under their breath. But they were saying things like, well, he hasn't been around. Yeah. So it tells me he hasn't really tried to be a part of it in the first place. But
yeah, that was the feel I got for it. All right, we better take a few calls here. Sorry to make everybody wait. And go ahead.
Bruce W. You there, Bruce? I'm guessing most of them bounced.
Everybody's like, fuck this, man. These guys are just talking.
Nick T, you there?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I was sort of wondering, since we got a lot of those long-term classic Alex Anthopoulos extensions this year, like who would you say on the team besides Max Fried is maybe the obvious candidate for that? We don't talk about maybe William Contreras or Kyle Wright, or would we even do a bullpen arm like AJ Minter or Travis d'Arnaud? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, d'Arnaud's a little old for a long-term extension, but I think Contreras, you play one more year with d'Arnaud signed for next year, so you got another year for him to keep developing as a catcher, and he made huge strides this year. And if he keeps progressing like that, then you do look at something like that with him. But to me, Kyle Wright's the guy you do, because I mean he's really came into his own this year, stayed healthy, he's durable. He had the arm fatigue at one point, but no injuries. to speak of in his career, like big injuries, shoulder or elbow. Big, durable, strong guy. And
Smart.
Yeah, really smart, really works hard. Another guy you're not going to have to worry about. And, he's a big dude. I don't think people realize how, he's not a skinny guy. He's not going to be frail or anything. So I think that portends to a long, healthy career. He's really turned a corner, and I think he'd get him for a really reasonable price. I don't think he's going to be looking to break the bank either. So he's a really obvious one now that, Strider is signed. Other than that, I mean, you don't have to do everybody on the team. They've already got more guys signed to long-term deals than almost any team does, I think, than any team does. So you kind of let it play out and see which guys really are deserving of that. Maybe Grissom, totally excels in left field if they have him out there. We got to wait and see. But, I mean, if that's a guy, if his first month in the big leagues this year was any indication, he's a guy with superstar potential. But we'll have to wait and see.
I haven't done any research, but I'd say start with agents that aren't household names.
I had an agent who is a household name tell me the same thing.
Yep. If you see a guy that comes up and he's getting super hot and he's under 2 years of service and you don't know who his agent is, that could be who you bet on to sign the next one of those contracts.
I had another agent who's very prominent tell me, and he said, God bless Alex, man. He's going in and finding all these agents who are in trouble or whose agency is trying to get off the ground. They're trying to make a name for themselves. They want a piece of that contract right away.
Well, they want that guaranteed money. Yes. Sending these guys cleats in the minor leagues and taking them out to Applebee's for 5 years.
Yes.
Time to get paid.
Unlike the big agents who, they want the best deal and the biggest deal. They don't need the money right now. They're not trying to keep the door. They're not trying to keep the lights on at the agency and all that.
Yeah. If you see a client come up, or if you see a prospect come up and his agent's Forrest, he can hit 700 home runs in the first season, and they can offer him anything they want. He's not signing.
So true, man. So true. That's an astute GM right there who sees the moment.
Yep.
With a lot of guys.
He sees a ripe agent, he's going to just start pecking.
Yep.
So
that's cool. Thank you, guys. I hadn't thought about that agent.
Yep. It's a huge factor. Yep. Huge. A lot of these guys are represented by guys who might be really good agents, but they're just getting started or they don't have a big client base, maybe it's somebody they knew coming up or all that. So a lot of them are not household names, these agents that they're working with. In fact, really none of them are, the really big, huge deals that they've done.
Yeah. And it's also, these agents want to be set for life too. If you sign a guy to an $80 million contract, you're not going to have to grind after you get 5% of that.
Yeah, you're not like Boris. You're not trying to compete to be the biggest super agent in the world, stacking billions on top of billions.
Trying to buy a house.
Yeah, exactly.
Reggie W.
Hey, what's going on, guys? You can hear me?
What's happening?
Hey, what's going on, DLB? Sorry for your loss, man. And
thank you.
Oh yeah, no problem. So I got three for you. What's your thoughts on Justin Henry Malloy? How we kind of talked throughout the season, you kind of had guys in the minors where you were kind of impressed with. So I would say, what's one hitter and one pitcher that you could, going into next year, you think maybe can contribute to the team? And what type of splash free agent you think that the Braves could potentially go after? And then, I got one for you, man.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're familiar with J.R. Ritchie, but I know he's up there, in your neck of the woods. So I didn't know if maybe you heard something about him before the Braves got him, or, if you had any thoughts on him. And I'll put it on mute.
Stud, man. That's a dude from the island off Seattle.
Yeah, you're going to have to go to Dave on prospects, man. I look into them when they get called up.
That Ritchie dude's a stud. I mean, a lot of people thought he would have gone in the first round. He might have been their best pick that they got, and was going to UCLA. Really great arm, great body. That's going to fill out and really aggressive. They really like his secondary pitches. He got a great fastball. I think he's going to be a stud, man. No doubt. That I don't think it's going to take that long on them.
For me, it's so much of it's mental, of prospects turning out and everything. And I think the Braves do their homework, but I have a hard time getting too excited about prospects because it's all going to come down to what's going on up top. You get drafted and there's, I got drafted with 5 lefties better than me and none of them made it to majors.
I really like Justin Henry Malloy. That's a guy that really impressed a lot of people this year. The guy that got from out of Georgia Tech in the 6th round last year in 2021 draft. And what really jumps off about him is the OBP, which you just don't see much these days. OBPs like he's got in the minors. He's got a career. Let's see, we're looking at in 2 seasons in the minors, got a 404 OBP, 854 OPS. He started out at High A Rome? Yeah, he started out at Rome and finished at Gwinnett, and he spent half the season at Rome and hit 304 there, 409 OBP, similar stuff to Michael Harris. 889 OPS, goes to Double-A, hits 268 with a 403 OBP there, impressive. Because he's got these strikeouts to walks that you don't see anymore. That's like you used to see all the time when guys tried to walk as much, or like Chipper never struck out 100 times, had more walks than strikeouts in his career. You don't see guys like that anymore that hit for any power or anybody. But this guy last year
throwing hard and guys getting promoted that are throwing hard, like the stuff they're up against, it's easier to strike out than ever.
So this guy at 3 levels last year in 133 games, Henry Malloy. He hit 289, 408 OBP, had 97 walks and 138 strikeouts with 17 homers. I mean, he's a stud. Third base, left field. I don't know because he played both of them a lot last year. He played mostly third base and DH though. But actually, I'm looking at the breakdown. He had equal number of games in left field and third base, so 51 and 51. And DH about 17 games. Also played some.
At what level?
He started high and ended up in AAA last year.
Oh,
so
yeah. Well, the way they're doing it now too,
he could be in play. And this is a guy that was a college guy, so he's not really young. He's 22, and be 23 in February. So he'll be 23 at spring training. So this guy could come quick for sure. I mean, we could see him next year if he keeps that up, because the OBP really jumps out. Like I said, that's something that this team could really would like to add a young guy who gets on base like that. I mean, that's potentially really big, impactful type thing. 28 doubles, 17 homers last year, 81 RBIs, just great numbers. I mean, really good numbers. So
mixing guys in on power teams too is so. I mean, you need somebody on base when you hit that homer. Yeah, I think that a lot of teams that you're watching kind of struggle with that all or nothing offense in the playoffs. Is you need guys like a Martin Prado or a guy like you're talking about that can just get on base and have those really tough at bats. I thought that was what did Strider and was that at bat Stott had.
Oh my God!
10 at bat, just fouling off the pitches.
That was impressive.
On. I mean, that was one of the big differences in that series. So
he's really made it an impact this year in his first year, and you've seen the Braves time and time again. When you think, he needs a little longer, so I'm not even going to predict this time that he needs a lot. I mean, he might come in spring training and compete for a job, depending on what they do in left field. I mean,
I've learned my lesson because there's been a couple guys you've talked about the last few years, and you're telling me about them, and they're an A-ball, and I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
And next, a month later, they're in the big leagues, or 2 months later, or the next season early on, they're in the big leagues. Michael Harris, Long Grissom. You were telling me about these guys, and I was like, okay, cool. Let's see how they do. And
so this guy's already played more games in Double-A than that Harris did, 54, and 8 games in Triple-A, which Harris played none. So I'm not saying he's Michael Harris, but I'm saying he's got really nice numbers and the kind of numbers that you just don't see anymore and with the uppercuts and all the strikeouts today, so that he could come. As far as pitching prospect, I think we've seen most of their top pitching prospects that are going to impact next year. And the guy that really I think could really compete next year is Elder. I mean, he showed me enough in those starts, especially that one at Washington. I know the Nats are bad, but that was just impressive what he did that night. and those starts
Also,
against the
just
Marlins.
Ability to eat innings. I think
Yeah.
there's been so many prospects called up for the Braves the last 3-4 years that they either deal for 6 or 7 innings or they get torched by the second. Elder kind of has that feel to him as a guy that could go out there when he doesn't have it, just find a way to battle and give you 5, and that in itself has a lot of value.
I think we could see 1 or 2 of them traded, like Muller. I don't know how much more Muller can do in AAA if they don't think he's going to compete, at this level next year. There are teams that would want a 6'7" lefty who throws 98. He doesn't hit 100 like he used to, but that's I think more because he's learned to pitch. Jared Schuster, there's a guy, lefty Jared Schuster. We could see him. That's one that we have not seen that we certainly could next year.
What about Tarnop?
Yeah, I liked when he came up. I know we didn't get to see, but he only pitched a couple of innings. But, they liked him enough to bring him up, and he really made huge progress in the last year. And he filled out, developed that secondary pitch, and, yeah, I like him. Yeah, he's got really fucking great deception because his delivery is all over the elbows and everything, and that one of those kind of God, why am I not thinking of the lefty? I really like the guy, the lefty the Braves had that went to the Dodgers and the Giants from UGA.
Alex Wood.
Yeah, kind of the Alex Wood funky type thing. There's something to be said for that when a guy's so different than anything else anybody sees. And Tarnok is really funky delivery and a really great personality too, for what that's worth. I liked him when he was here briefly. So yeah, there's a couple of good arms down there that we could definitely see next year if they they could go out and if they want to spend the money other than on the rotation, they could go out and get an innings eating veteran for a pretty low price and have him compete with those young guys step in for that fifth starter job.
Yeah, I think you got it right there in Bryce Elder, but
yeah, I really like him.
Thanks, Reggie.
He's good.
Sammy O.
Oh my gosh, I'm really on with you guys. I'm so excited to be here.
You did it.
What's up, Sammy O?
Yeah, I'll take your answer off the air so there's no echo, okay? But I was just wondering if you guys could please give me some insight on why Jim Powell is not doing games full time anymore. I really miss him. I was a huge fan of his, and I can't get the answer. So I'll take your answer off the air, okay, guys? I really appreciate what you guys do. Thank you so much.
And let's take we want to do one more after this one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the reason you're not getting the answer is because it's a sensitive topic. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. And that's not to say Jim did anything, because he certainly didn't. So I don't read anything into that. But that was just their choice to cut back on his games and to put Ben on more. And Ben has become kind of the primary voice. I've asked the same thing and not really gotten a great straight answer, and nobody's going to go on the record about it. So I don't know what to tell you other than those decisions are made sometimes. How to put this? They're around those people a lot more than I'm around those people. Like, I see those guys. I see the TV guys, radio guys. We're friendly, all of them. I see them in the press box. I see them on the field, like Chip's on the field all the time. Frenchie's on the field all the time. Joe's down there. So I see those guys. Ben's down there. Talk to them in the clubhouse sometimes. But I don't see them nearly as much, obviously, as the people they work with. And like any other work environment, decisions are made based on things that only the people that you're working with know or, what they're looking for. So, and that's as much as I want to say, because I do not want to take any shot at Jim, because I'm with you. I think Jim's got a great voice. I love listening to him. And when I'm mowing the lawn, sometimes I'm not covering a game, I listen to the radio. And I always liked him. I thought he had great radio voice, but Ben's really good too. So I don't know why the decision was made to cut back. And it was probably a contractual thing where he's under contract, so they kept him, for whatever, however many more years he was under that contract. But other than that, I don't know. And again, that's not to take a shot at anybody, because I've never experienced anything that would any negative anything with Jim or and I like all those guys. I think they're all good. I think the Braves are blessed to have really good broadcasters, both TV and radio. And I wouldn't say that just to say it because I have nothing to gain by saying it, but they really have a long history of having really good radio and TV broadcasters.
Yeah, I mean the same thing happens with coaches.
Yeah.
There's a reason for it, and a lot of times you don't get an explanation, but there'll be a coach gone, and you're like, shit, I love that guy. It's
like when Snit got bumped to AAA.
Yeah, we're like, what was that for?
Yeah.
What do you do? But stuff just happens, and sometimes it just stays in house.
Yeah. Like when
Marty Reed got fired. I like
exactly. They won't come out and say this, and this. They'll just say we wanted to go in a different direction. That's about all you're going to get.
Which, to an extent, that's kind of a good thing to do because it is a personality, something. You're not hurting the guy getting another job or moving
exactly.
On. Just keep it in house, and this isn't working, but good luck.
Yeah, like when they fired Kelsey or didn't renew her contract or however you want to put it. Yep. They didn't come out and say she didn't do this, she didn't do that, whatever the reasons were for saying it. They stayed above board, and you don't want to hurt somebody's chances of getting another job by saying, just because you had a personality conflict or you had one person or whatever that didn't like how they did their job. So I know that's probably not a satisfactory answer, but that's about as much as you're going to get from anybody, I think.
Jacob M. What's up, Jacob?
Hey, you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Nice. Enjoy the podcast as always. My question here, and just real quick, hindsight is 2020, but I was just kind of thinking through the struggles in left field with, kind of Eddie's season, what he went through, and then eventually Duvall's injury as well. Do you think that having Peterson, usually the year he had, would
we lost you? We lost you for a second. Were you asking about if they'd have brought him back?
Yeah, if you think there could have been maybe any different result. I mean, the regular season result, it's hard to argue with that, but maybe in the playoffs, given his energy and kind of what he brought.
Well, sure. I mean, but, they didn't bring him back because, Jock wanted to play every day. They saw him as a platoon guy. When they got here last year, they played him every day. And remember what happened? Eventually, when Eddie came back, Jock became a platoon guy, didn't play a whole lot. And then all anybody remembers is how great he was in the postseason because those 2 home runs he hit against Milwaukee. And then, he had some, as Jock does, he had some big hits. But as an everyday guy, and I don't think he played every day this year either, right, with the Giants. But I don't know that if he'd have been the answer. In hindsight, you had no idea that Eddie was going to come down with a serious eye injury at spring training that required surgery, I mean, who knows what kind of season Eddie might have had if he didn't have to have his eyes cut open, Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty serious thing. And so can't really fault him for that. They signed Eddie to a 2-year deal, and I thought it was a pretty good deal when they signed him. So, and remember, Eddie was great too in the postseason. I mean, good Lord, the LCS, he just, so I don't know. I don't know if it could have been different or whatever, but I just go back to you can't really plan on things like that. And there really wouldn't have been enough ABs for both of those guys if they'd have brought both of them back. In addition to Ozuna, who they obviously kept, and for better or worse.
I think that was something that was kind of maybe not missing because you can't predict who it's going to be. But I think a big factor in that series was anytime you see a team go on some crazy World Series run, it's like a Kike Hernandez or somebody that's maybe not necessarily their best player in the season, but
steps
just has
up.
a knack for somehow coming up at the right time hot and getting that big hit. And it seemed like the Braves didn't have that random dude step up this year.
Yeah, like going way back, a guy like Mark Lemke has a great series. Eddie Perez is an NLCS MVP. And then last year, case example of that. I mean, Jock hits 2 pinch hit home runs in the NLDS.
Yep.
Eddie is the NLCS MVP and it dominated the Dodgers as one batter has not dominated them in a series probably in years.
Yeah.
And then Soler in the World Series is the MVP. I mean, Soler was terrific after having COVID and missing almost the entire LCS. So you can't even script that. Those guys all surpassed expectations. All played better after the Braves got him in trade. So it was a magical year for the Braves. That's why everybody should appreciate it even more, how tough it is to win a World Series. But because I thought really top to bottom, I thought when healthy this year's team was probably better than last year's. I really did.
Better. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought so too.
Yeah. So next year, you're going to have a healthy Acuna from day one. That should be a huge difference. And, Olsen won't be adjusting and dealing with all the pressures and all that. And, you're going to have Grissom competing for a job. You got center field now. As last year, winning center field is a big question mark. Can Duvall play it every day? What happens in the corners? You're going to have to play Ozuna sometimes. This year, you got all that settled. You got center field and right field are taken care of, So it looks good for next year, man. But I don't know. I'm not going to fault them for the offseason moves this year. I thought Alex did what he could reasonably expected to do, and then made some good moves at the deadline, and made some good moves at the deadline as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's just that's what the postseason just turns into. The hottest team, and in the Astros case, if you're just flat out probably the best team and also playing the best, but they still had to get a big home run from Albert
right.
Jordan,
to get there.
It is what it is.
Jordan hit 2 huge home runs in that first round.
Huge home runs.
LDS.
You got to put the best team out there that you can, but postseason, man, anything can happen.
Yeah. And they didn't have one guy just put them on their backs this time. They didn't get deep enough to really have one guy do it, but, they didn't. They just everything sputtered at the wrong time against a team that did have some guys stepping up.
A lot of guys.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for all the questions. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk to y'all again next week, sometime probably.
Yep. Thanks for coming on.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on 755 is Real from David, Eric, and myself. Great turnout of the live room. Again, if you want to be notified when we do host those live rooms, make sure you're following David and Eric on Twitter. You're also following the podcast feed on your podcast player of choice, and that you're also subscribed to the show on YouTube. As mentioned before the beginning of the show, make sure you do all that. It helps us out a bunch. Thank you all so much. And as always, 755 is Real. We're out.